I'm Jordan Anglin-Reimer, a proud member of the Prime Minister's Youth Council. Our council represents young voices from across Canada, advising on key issues like climate action, inclusivity, and the future of technology. As Kate and David mentioned, our inaugural council was unveiled at the opening ceremony of the One Young World Council in Ottawa 8 years ago. Since then, a number of us have become One Young World ambassadors, and I'm honored to represent the council here today and continue that powerful legacy. As young leaders, the Prime Minister's Youth Council recognize the profound impact AI will have on our world. We're committed to ensuring it's used to create opportunities, empower communities, and drive positive change. I'm delighted to introduce our next panel to discuss this morning's plenary challenge. How can humanity make AI a force for good? It's my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of Mila, a trailblazer in AI working at the intersection of innovation and social impact, Valerie Pisano. Next, one of the world's leading figures in artificial intelligence and a pioneer of deep learning, known as one of the godfathers of AI. He's the founder of Mila, a recipient of the Turing Award, often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Computing, and a key voice in the ethical development of AI, Professor Yoshua Bengio. And finally, someone who has made it a personal mission to build a more inclusive and innovative Canada, a passionate advocate for youth empowerment, climate action, and the responsible use of technology, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Bonjour, Monsieur Gouin. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à Montréal. It is an honor to sit down with two of the great architects of AI. Yasha, many things have already been said. You are the most cited computer scientist in the world and recently named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world today. Monsieur le Premier Ministre, AI as we know it today is surprisingly Canadian. Your government was among the first to roll out a national strategy for AI, and today Canada is among the top nations for AI. So welcome and thank you to you both. Let's start by going back in time a little bit. As teenagers, you both read a lot of science fiction. So can you share with us all some of your early fascination for the possibilities of human-like robots and what we call today artificial intelligence?
Well, listen, I was young in the 70s and 80s, but my sci-fi was a lot older than that. Isaac Asimov and stories like The Last Question, or his use of the 3 laws of robotics that has been sort of a basis for a lot of writing and reflecting on how artificial intelligence can be impactful in people's lives. Heinlein, and his vision of society. Like, there's so many things that I used to love about sci-fi, and it wasn't always about laser guns and spaceships. The thing that is brilliant for me about sci-fi is always you're putting a human being in a completely different situation than our day-to-day lives and looking at how they react and how they think and how they thrive or not. And what we are living in terms of the pace of technological change is bringing such massive changes to our world that being able to think around corners a little bit about how humans are going to behave and act and react, given these new technologies that connect us and challenge us and change the world in such a rapid way, I find having a healthy respect for speculative sci-fi is actually helpful in the way we move forward.
Yeshua?
Yeah, absolutely. For my part, I would add Space Odyssey 2001, which actually is one of the movies that has the most scientifically realistic depiction of how AI, would be trained. So it's already learning machines, and how things could go wrong. Asimov's laws of robotics are interesting in addition to what you said, because although he proposes these laws, a lot of the stories are about how, in spite of the laws, something bad happens. And that, it forces us to think that it's actually subtle and complicated to make machines that will be moral.
Let's fast forward quite a bit. November 2022, a small not very well-known company called OpenAI released something called ChatGPT. And we collectively went from reading books and watching movies and talking a lot about AI to actually experiencing generative AI firsthand. So if you can go back to your first kind of interactions with this and share some of what were your thinking, your reactions.
But, first of all, you can't point at November of 2022 and say, oh, suddenly AI happened there. There's been a lot of research and search into AI for a long, long time, decades. It goes back to Alan Turing. And have we passed the Turing test and nobody noticed?
My opinion is that we did, and people disagree because the Turing test has never been formally defined.
Yeah.
But at some level, it's clear we now have machines that master language, and that it could be difficult to distinguish if you're talking to a machine or a human. There was a recent study out of Europe where they compared the ability of GPT-4 and humans through a dialogue to persuade someone to change their mind on something. Guess who won? And guess what that means for disinformation and political influence? Yes.
But I mean, so there's been a lot of research over many, many decades into the idea of artificial intelligence. And one of the reasons we're talking about Canada as having a leadership role is because through a period known as the AI winter in like the 80s and 90s, when people around the world, researchers, were sort of giving up on AI, the federal government in Canada kept investing in foundational research and academics in a way that people like Joshua, Jeffrey Hinton out of Toronto, even Rich Sutton in Edmonton, kept pushing forward through this AI winter and got to a place of deep learning where Canada was key to eventually this moment where everyone's now talking about AI, but we've had an advantage for a long time in thinking about that, and you at the center of that.
And I need to name CFAR here as the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research that has enabled all these things already several decades ago, and continue to manage the current, a lot of the current efforts in Canada with the Pan-Canadian AI strategy that your government set up.
Yeah.
So a lot of things happened over decades, and it all comes together, and then there's ChatGPT, which the godfather of AI just said passes the Turing test, which is, significant in the history of humankind.
Yeah, Turing thought that once a machine passes a Turing test, they have reached human-level intelligence. Now,
the Turing test is just, can a human tell they're talking to a computer versus talking to another human being?
Thanks, Mr. Prime Minister.
I used to be a school teacher, so I know people are probably wondering.
Yeah, if you dig a little bit, experts find that the current systems are still not at the level of humans in areas that are crucial, like reasoning as well as humans. Or agency, like the ability to plan, to take actions over the long term. But we see progress continues. Just like a week ago, OpenAI released a new approach, completely new approach to get systems that can reason very well. It's called O1. And this system has been evaluated with an IQ of 120. And it's passing exams, math and physics and biology exams at the PhD level. Now, it is also lacking in other respects, so it's just the beginning. But clearly, we're continuing to move forward towards machines that will be at our level in many, many ways, or beyond.
And you're concerned about this and quite vocal about it. A few months after OpenAI released ChatGPT, you signed a letter that was asking for a pause in these giant AI experiments. This made headlines across the world and triggered a series of events, including hearings in the U.S. at the U.S. Senate, the Bletchley first ever AI Safety Summit, and initiatives at the United Nations that have been shared this week and next week. At the same time, Prime Minister Trudeau, you and your team have been working on a piece of legislation. Here in Canada, you announced a reinvestment, $2.4 billion in the ecosystem we have here, and the creation of the Canadian AI Safety Institute. So, Joshua, maybe give us a sense of where we're at in all of this. You've been involved in all of these initiatives. You've had a bit of a front row and center seat. Are we going in the right direction? Have we made good progress?
So I'm chairing an international report that's going to have an IPCC-like panel on AI safety. And the trends are very clear. We're going towards machines that are going to be as smart or smarter than humans. At the same time, the timeline is unknown. You can't predict how fast science will advance. The shorter timelines might be 2 or 3 years. The longer ones might be decades. But from the point of view of public policy, we need to be prepared for the shorter timelines. And there's right now a lot of investment, especially in companies, but also in academia, to make AI smarter. And there's a chance that once we get to the point where these machines can do the job of a human AI researcher, then they're going to be using AI to accelerate AI research. So let's say we take the 5 smartest AI researchers at OpenAI, but now they've trained an entity that is as good at this particular very kind of scientific job as these people. And now one trained model essentially gives you like 100,000 humans working in parallel with that capability. So you go from 5 to 100,000, what's going to happen to the speed of advances? So this could be good for the beneficial uses of AI, but if we don't put in the right guardrails, both technical and political, it could be very dangerous. And right now there's not enough investment to solve these problems on both of these fronts, the scientific front and the political front.
Prime Minister Trudeau, this presents great challenges for policymakers and world leaders such as yourself. Like Yasha, you're describing basically between the uncertainty of trajectory and then the speed of development and the potential impact of this. What are some of your thoughts on what's happening right now, where we're at, people coming together, the UN Summit of the Future next week?
Well, I mean, first of all, when we talk about AI and the dangers of AI, we're talking a lot about the worst case scenarios, what is world ending or weaponizing or all those things. And those are real threats that absolutely we're all working on together to try and make sure we're not allowing or not enabling people down those paths too aggressively. But AI is also going to transform just about every different part of our lives. And a huge part of my responsibility as a leader is, yes, to protect against those dangerous, nefarious uses of AI, but it's also making sure that people continue to have good jobs, meaningful lives, enabled and empowered and enhanced perhaps by AI, but that doesn't harm Canadians or citizens and people around the world and the pathways in which we're on. I mean, the fact is we've now reached a point where AI is going to be part of our future no matter what. And that's where, and actually something Joshua said to me as we were chatting backstage was really, really key, which is why your generation specifically matters so much. I mentioned I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher in my first years on the job when Google appeared. And the difference between doing research in school before there was a Google versus after was a step change in everything we did. And my generation, Gen Xers, are the last generation that remembered what an analog world was and were fully comfortable in the digital internet-enabled world that happened through the 90s and into the 2000s. You similarly are going to be the last generation that remembers what the world was like before AI was everywhere, and you will also become the best, most nimble users of it, but you won't be the AI natives that the next generation is going to be. So your generation as a pivot generation, watching the transformation and actually, quite frankly, defining the world that we live in is unbelievably important. So the fact that AI is taking such a huge part of this conversation is really, really important and, quite frankly, really exciting to me as a policymaker and as a legislator, because I'm trying to figure out what the world could look like, and your engagement in that is going to help us make sure we're creating the right frame for your success, but also the success of all future generations.
Yeah, let me reinforce that message. It's difficult to accept that the future in 5, 10, 20 years could be incredibly different from what it is now. And it is harder to have that imagination for people, maybe my age. And I see that young people are usually more flexible in their thinking, more open-minded. As Prime Minister Trudeau was telling me when we were having this discussion, their life, which is shorter, has seen a lot of changes, and they can envision more changes. And as he said, it is only those who can envision a completely different future who can act to steer it in the directions that are going to be beneficial, in the directions where we don't create monsters, we don't create dangerous weapons with AI. We reap the benefits in all of the fields that matter to our well-being. But that requires stepping out of the here and now and imagining the future potentially very different. We need the best minds of your generation to help in making that happen. Because a lot of people, even my colleagues, AI researchers, half of them think, oh no, this is science fiction. They don't even, many of them don't even believe that we have passed the Turing test, that we have machines that can already understand languages. Oh no, it must be just parroting humans. But in reality, there's now recent studies showing that these systems actually understand and actually generalize to new cases in ways that are similar to humans in some ways, but also in ways that are alien to humans. And so we need that generation to be able to embrace that uncertainty, and we have agency to create a good future, an amazingly good future. But it's not going to happen if we just follow what everyone is saying or follow our previous habits. We need that imagination power.
But more than that, just following previous habits, what we see in a lot of spaces, whether it's in business or in politics, this idea that we need is nostalgic, where, oh my God, there's so many changes going on, let's make America great again. Let's go towards the past. Let's try and create society the way it used to be, as opposed to diving into the future. And it's for sure, it's scarier to dive into the future, but that's the only way we can do it. And that's where your voices are so incredibly important. Because leaders are trying to catch up in a lot of senses. And I'll tell you, talk about 2022 as being a hinge moment. Back in 2018, Canada hosted the G7. We hosted the G7 here in Quebec of the advanced industrialized nations. And I was the one hosting that. And we put on the table a global partnership for AI. This was the first time we were saying, okay, AI is coming. We should all work together as advanced industrialized economies. And I will tell you, of all the other leaders, nobody was really interested in talking about AI. Okay, it's a nice idea. We'll approve of that, but we're not really going to take it on. And that was one of the first pieces of the global conversation that's now happening everywhere. It'll be taking over the conversation next week at the UN General Assembly. It's happening here. It's happening everywhere as leaders are trying to grapple with that. And we're hosting the G7 again next year. And it'll be at the heart of where we're moving forward to try and make sure we're bringing in young thinkers and all of you to imagine a transformed world. Because if you imagine a world that's going to be like the one it used to be, you're going to get it wrong. If we're picturing and leaping towards the future in a way that brings you along, well, suddenly we have a chance of shaping that future in a way that's truly going to be beneficial for everyone. And that's what we're busy all working on together right now.
So building off this, you set the table very nicely, and for our last few minutes together, this is an opportunity to reference someone called Amy Webb. You might know she's a futurist. Her talk at the tech conference South by Southwest is one of the most popular. So interestingly enough, she invites us to pivot from thinking about Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, to thinking about humankind as a single generation. And she calls it the transition generation. This is exactly what you were saying. She says, and I quote, "Everyone alive today, every one of us is part of a major transition, and our society will be very different when that transition is complete." Yasha, you've decided to take everything you know about AI, everything you believe about this technology, and be one of the people who steers this transition, towards what you hope will be the good side of history. What is your hope for what comes next? Like, what would you like to see in the next, 12 to 24 months to feel like we're taking the right path?
If humanity was a single mind, if we could coordinate properly, we would do the right things. It's fairly obvious. And the challenge is we're not, of course, a single mind. There are forces of competition between corporations, forces of competition between countries. And so my hope is that enough people understand that there are huge benefits, but also huge risks, so that we accept to let go a bit of sovereignty, for example, in the case of countries, and in the case of cooperation, to be more careful about protecting the public and democracy, so that we steer that big boat that what humanity is in the right direction. And I think we can have this positive vision, but not by being blind to the dangers. That's not going to work.
We have to be realists. Mr. Prime Minister, the final word, any ask or advice for everyone listening today? Well,
I think one of the things you started getting me thinking about science fiction, and I was thinking about Jurassic Park, the original book, where Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, talks about, in the movie, talks about the accelerated pace of learning and knowledge and science, and the fact that if you're a martial arts expert, you will spend decades, perhaps, getting to the point where you can, kill someone with your finger. And the idea is, once you gain that particular power, you will have lived with it and grown into it so much that you'll never use it or never have to use it except in unimaginable circumstances, because you have gained control over the power you have. And the story of Jurassic Park, or waking up dinosaurs again, or AI now, means that we are all busy stepping on each other as we're creating more and more tools that we haven't had time to sit back and reflect on what's going to be the consequence of this, or what's going to be the challenge of that, or what's going to be the benefit of this. We just sort of throw it because we can. We're creating all these amazing new technologies without thinking what it's going to mean 5 years from now, let alone 50 years from now. And that's the situation we're in right now, where we are, thanks to Joshua and a lot of brilliant people, but also a lot of good people thinking about, psychology and sociology and how to build strong communities and service and shaping the world in the right ways. We're busy thinking, okay, we have this tool that could go really, really fast to empower all sorts of things that we might want empowered or might not. How do we make sure that we're using it for good, that we're being thoughtful about the parameters we're building around it? And anytime you're trying to put parameters around innovation, people are going to resist, because you never exactly know, oh, but if I go down this path, it might be the solution to empower and strengthen everything, but it also might be a disaster and create something that is world-ending. So the idea that we're, yes, trying to develop, because AI responsibly used is going to be one of the most powerful tools against AI used for violence or negativity or disinformation. So how we develop this tool in a positive way is going to come down to a lot of really thoughtful conversations and critical thinking that your generation is going to be at the center of. You guys are all seeing, there's people every day making decisions about what your life is going to be 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And the more you can be involved in it through summits like this, but also through what choices you make in your daily lives, the career paths you take, is going to, I think more than anything else, define the world that all of our grandkids will live in. And this moment, as you say, this transition moment, this hinge moment we're at right now, means we need you to step up more than ever before. And I'm just so glad to see that's exactly what you're doing here today.
Professor Yasha Benjo, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. See you again. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Can we get a quick photo with you guys? Can we get a quick photo with you guys in the front? Okay, quick photo.
Oh, a photo.
Got a camera there?
Valérie, get down here. Here we go.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you, Prime Minister, Professor Benjo and Valerie. How amazing was that?